Hey, what's up? Silas here. This is going to be a video about marriage and reproduction and things like that. And this really interesting article I just found, I'm going to read for you guys soon, called Chinese Researchers in China have spawned healthy mice with two biological mothers and no father. So already here, list the terms mother and father. We're talking about biological, that's the key here. Biological mother and father, because I think when you're talking about actual families, which I'll get into later, human families, we don't necessarily need biology for somebody to be a father and mother. I think that's a very proven thing that I think most people can agree on if you put just a little bit of thought into it, just from the simple action of you can adopt somebody. And yeah, maybe you're in a stepmother and these kind of situations where somebody's not your biological kin, but you're still their parent, you're still their father, you're still their mother. Then you can have things where somebody is a biological mother or a father, but you don't know. Like, for example, if somebody has a kid, you go and you have sex with somebody, the woman has the child without your knowledge, you technically have a kid out there. Or let's even get it further, where you have artificial insemination. You give your sperm to a sperm bank, a woman comes and gets that sperm. You are technically a biological father of a child, but you are not that child's father. You are not the father, and we'll get into some of that later too, the more published type stuff. Let me jump into the article right now. Oh yeah, before I get into the article, let me ask you guys a question. Excuse me, been dealing with something in my throat. I think it's mosquitoes and the temperature and riding the bike in the wind. I don't know, combination of things. But anyway, here we go. What do you guys think the purpose of marriage is? Speaking specifically of the human institution of marriage, be it polygamy or monogamy, just what do you guys think the main purpose of marriage is? How it was developed, and also for you personally, what do you think the main purpose of marriage is? And I'll get back to that after I read this stuff and probably talk about a few other things. So let's get into the article. It's going to be links below to this article, of course. This is from Science Alert. Science Alert! So Chinese researchers have spawned healthy mice with two biological mothers and no father. This is unprecedented. By deleting key sequences of DNA in embryonic stem cells harvested from female mice, Chinese researchers successfully kicked off a new generation of the tiny mammals without the need for males to fertilize any eggs. These fatherless mice not only made it to adulthood, they also went on to have babies of their own, demonstrating the method is a vast improvement on early attempts to assist reproduction without the need of both a male and female parent. Biologists, biologists. Why am I going with like logis? It's biologists from the Chinese Academy of Sciences used a special editing technique on male and female-derived haploid embryonic stem cells, ESCSs. Sorry. These are effectively blank slate cells that contain just half of a species' chromosomes, not unlike tissue associated with the production of sex cells. Reproduction without the need for sperm, a process called parthenogenesis, is nothing new in the animal kingdom. Many insects can pop out clones of their mother. So can a number of fish. There are even lizards and amphibians without daddies. Mammals, on the other hand, drew the short straw when it comes to creative means of having babies. We were interested in the question of why mammals can only undergo sexual reproduction, says the study's co-senior author, Zhu. I think it's Zhu. It's Qi and then Zhou. So Zhu. Zhu. I could be completely off with that. Excuse me if I am. It was already well known that specific genes were epigenetically silenced during the development of those blank stem cells in mammals, with the genes depending on whether the cells came from the mother or the father. This process of genomic imprinting means that combining a half dose of genetic material from just two eggs or two sperms runs the risk of having both copies of an essential gene silenced, something we definitely do not want in a single-sex parent situation. In 2004, Japanese researchers successfully navigated their way around this hurdle by selecting a maternal set of chromosomes that contained the fewest imprints. This sperm analog was then used to fertilize a typical ova, making a mouse with two mothers, which they named Kaguya after a fairy tale character. Kaguya is a name that's often used, at least it's an aside, it's often used in manga and anime, and I read a lot of manga and watch a decent amount of anime. So yeah, very interesting system with the Shintoism, their history, their what's called mythology, very interesting stuff in Japan and things like that. Okay, back to the article. As effective as this technique was in the end, it left a lot to be desired as far as efficiency and reliability. The generated mice still showed defective features, and the method itself is very impractical and hard to use, says Zhou. Years later, genetic editing technology has improved to the point that researchers can now selectively edit these imprint regions. The research team cultured haploid ESCs from female mice to have minimal levels of genomic printing. We found in this study that haploid ESCs were more similar to primordial germ cells, the precursors of eggs and sperm, says Baoyang Hu, also a co-senior author in the study. They then deleted 3 specific imprinted regions on the stem cells' chromosomes, effectively erasing their imprinting. These, quote, female sperm, unquote, were then implanted into healthy donor cells to fertilize them. The process is still far from flawless, and of the 210 embryos produced this way, only 29 live mice were born. But those that made it lived to maturity and had their own litters of pups, this time the old-fashioned way. But this news wasn't so good for achieving motherless babies from male-only mice. But the news wasn't so good for achieving motherless babies from male-only mice. In a similar process, 7 imprinted regions were edited in the haploid ESCs taken from male mice. These were then injected into an ova that had its maternal chromosomes removed and combined with the DNA from an edited sperm. The embryo was then implanted into a surrogate mother. Sadly, 12 pups were born, but none made it past the first 48 hours. If we're going to apply any of this to assisted reproductive technologies for humans, we still got a long way to go. Not just practically, but ethically. If the research is reproducible and also works in humans, it still has to be shown to be safe, says Bob Williamson, the chair of the Board of Stem Cells Australia, who wasn't involved in the research. The experiments are, however, important because they may shine a light on some causes of serious handicap in children. This is one of the monumental steps forward in understanding mammalian development and laying the groundwork for the new medical processes. This research shows us what's possible, says co-author Wei Li. We saw that the defects in bimaternal mice can be eliminated and that bipaternal reproduction barriers in mammals can also be crossed through imprinting modification. The research was published in Cell Stem Cell, which I think is a special magazine or something. There's a website called cell.com, so you guys can check it out. As I said, there's going to be links below to this article, and just a few interesting things to this. I mean, I've been following some of these fields a bit, like seeing what happens. I know they can reverse engineer stem cells, like they can get like a cell like your skin. I think I saw something where they can get a skin cell and then turn it into a stem cell, and then from stem cells can pretty much become any cell in your body. Then from the stem cell, they can make an egg and a sperm, and then they can find a way to do that. But then you see how there's some extra kind of hurdles to go over. But just amazing things that humanity is doing. Like I think probably in 1,000 years. But yeah, I posted this, and one of my friends was like, "Okay, is this going to make men obsolete?" And I know there's people who, when they see this, some people who are more feminist in the sense of the dislike of men for probably some practical reasons that happen in their childhood, and they can just have not many that good males around them as they grow up. And then they're talking about how, oh, this is going to make men like obsolete. We're not going to need men anymore. But we're already living in a time like that where you don't necessarily have to have intercourse in order to have a child, to get pregnant. You can go to artificial insemination. I talked before about how you have the sperm banks and things like that. It doesn't even have to be the sperm banks. It could literally be like, I like this male who's a friend of mine, have them just like masturbate, have an orgasm, get the sperm out. You can get that sperm, get a turkey baster, and I'm sure that could work. It's definitely not as sure or as it's not as likely to do this as you have when you just have like actual intercourse or actual artificial insemination by going to a clinic and things like that, but that could work. But people still choose to get into relationships because sex itself, even though I think the purpose of sex is reproduction, that's kind of why it's there. That's part of why it's pleasurable, and the orgasm and things like this is to increase that kind of experience going on and things like that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be pleasurable because that's with humans, and I think that's a selective thing that we did because some animals have like barbs in their penises and all these, or some animals like praying mantises, after you reproduce, the female eats you. There's this one parasite in the ocean that actually it's a parasite, but the man actually, the male fish swims up. It's a lot smaller than the female fish, and it swims up, and the penis gets stuck in, and then it kind of gets absorbed into the body of the female and feeds the weird stuff that goes out there. So you don't necessarily need to have males and females just for the reproduction thing. Even if this becomes as cheap as a turkey baster, like I mentioned, and on the opposite spectrum of it, there's a whole like artificial womb thing. If artificial womb technology comes and you don't need a female human to gestate the child anymore, that's not going to make the different genders obsolete because there's going to be different reasons why people still want to deal with other humans. So yeah, back to that question about marriage. What do you guys think? What is the purpose of marriage to you? And for me, I think it is just to have a more solid preferential environment for genes to reproduce themselves. Now, I think it's this the reproduction urge and things like that is your genes trying to be like, I'm trying to make another copy of myself. And it's a lot more effective as a human being to have a better chance of your genes continuing further and further on, to have that first the assurance that that kid is yours, because it's mother's baby, father's maybe. And on that side thing, I somehow got to watch some Maury Povich thing because there's a whole like believe all women thing, and the Maury Povich thing. There's these clips of Maury Povich, which is this talk show in the United States of America, and he has people come on for DNA tests, and there's these supercuts online of people coming up and, oh, you are not the father, and then the dad gets up and does like some dance or stuff. It's like, yeah, yeah, and then the woman like runs off to the back and she just cowardly fallen and start crying like, ah. And there's some situations where somebody is in their early teens and brings in like 6 different guys and is like, I don't know which one the father is, and this keeps going through people, and I'm like, what is wrong with these people? And then I went to something else. It was this show, I forget the name of this. It was some British show in the United Kingdom, Jeremy Kyle or something, let me check. Let me double check the name of this show, because I just ended up watching a bunch of these things. I don't know why I was watching so many of these things, but Jeremy Tells the Dolos. Yeah, the Jeremy Kyle Show. So the Jeremy Kyle Show, you have one of these other things where there's also different kinds of DNA tests. It's somebody's like, oh, I just met you like after talking online for 4 months or something. Sorry. I just met you after talking online for 4 months, and are you my father? And I'm 27, or I'm in my 30s, or are you my brother? Are you my sibling? So there's this whole urge of people wanting to know their genetic actual connection to somebody. And I think there is something there. Now, with a marriage situation, I think that's just something humans with our minds and our social constructs and things like that. Marriage is a social construct. I think the terms man and woman are social constructs because male and female aren't social constructs. Just like biological father and mother, that's not a social construct. But the actual idea of being a father, the actual idea of being a mother, in as finding a life form, a child, and then raising that child and nourishing them, and then wanting them to be an independent being and going out there, that's a social construct. And that changes depending on the society that you're in, on the culture that you're in. The expectations of a father in Saudi Arabia are going to be different from the expectations of an average father in Iceland. It's going to be different than the average father in China. An average mother in China is not going to have the same expectations as an average mother in like Bangladesh or something. So that's the kind of situation where I'm saying that's more of a social construct. There's some basic ones where it's like nourishment, but then like some countries, they expect your parents to hit the kid. Some countries, it's completely illegal. It's just not what happens. I don't think hitting should be at all involved in actual parenting, but a lot of people, for the majority of history, have been hitting their kids. And I think hitting children is going to be kind of like the new slavery thing, where since the beginning of time we've been having slaves, and now it's like most people it's like, how can we ever go back to that? I think in maybe 100 years, hopefully just 100 years, hopefully it doesn't take more than that. We're going to be looking back and like, how did people ever hit their kids? But so anyway, I think that's the purpose of that, and I think there is something where your genes actually call out to your genes, and that way goes into the evilness of the people who actually keep people's kids away from them or lie about the parenting of the kids. They're like, oh yeah, this is your kid. No, it's actually somebody else's kid, and you get that kind of connection, or you wonder why you're not as connected with this kid because it is so a lot of stuff in there. But yeah, that's what I think marriage is for. Marriage is for getting that situation where you have that kind of environment, most positive and beneficial environment for the genes of these two beings who come together to raise those genes and have them be as successful as possible to pass those genes on. So that's the video for today. What do you guys think about this stuff? What do you think of this technology? Have you been aware of this technology? What kind of situation would it take for you to do this? Like, would you be one of those people who's like, yeah, most definitely, I would love to have a kid that's just all me. Just like get my genes and just divide my genes. I don't know, there's some benefits of adding genes from the outside. I don't know, there was somebody who was telling me, I'd seen something a while back saying it's actually a higher chance of you having healthier kids by getting somebody who's as genetically different from you. And then you could possibly get the best things from both sides. And then you have that inverse where if you have like the incest, often you get like the two negative things. But even with incest, there's also a higher chance. There's also a lower chance, but where you get both the positive things of it. So it's like, let's say you like somebody who's muscular and strong, and that's the genes in the family. And if you have that kind of incest, there's a chance you're going to get both those muscular and strong ones. But I don't know. I think it's the thing is some recessive traits. This is completely just me just spitballing from the memories of things that I have from back in like biology class in high school and college and some of my random listening and stuff. Maybe it's if you have the two recessive ones and you get the two recessive genes, since there's no like from somebody who's not sharing your same genetic makeup, if you have a recessive gene for something like maybe like shortness or something, then you have the chance if somebody else is on different genetic backup, then they may have the height in that point. But if it's both of you guys, you'll both have the shortness, and then it's a higher chance of that shortness to happen. I don't know. That's probably not how it works. This gene stuff is kind of tough. I'm not a geneticist. I'm just a guy making YouTube videos. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think about this stuff. And goodbye. So with some of these videos I was watching about the paternity things and whatnot, I've had these questions. If you find out somebody is a brother of yours, a relative of yours, blood related, like your parents somehow had a kid that you didn't know about, and you've never met this person for 30 years, would you care to meet the person? Would you be very touched and moved? I don't know if I would, because they don't really have much in common with my life. But let's focus on the marriage thing. I don't think there's a purpose to getting married if you're not going to have kids. I think in general in the world, if you take out reproduction from the way people behave, you don't really understand why people are behaving in certain ways. And we already are in the time where we're selecting reasons to be married, to be together, off of not just reproduction. Like if you haven't actually talked, and sure you don't want to have kids before you get married, or talked about how you want to have kids, how you want to raise them, what schools you want to take them, what you want to teach them in. Do you want them to be religious? Do you want them to be in XYZ, learn what kind of language, live in what kind of location, be around what kind of people, what kind of things? If you haven't talked about these things, don't get married. Goodbye.